So I think that's a great question. It's very sort of insightful. I think the one thing that has really helped me progress in my career was gaining a lot of experience early on. And that's, not necessarily something that everybody gets to the opportunity to have. But I was very lucky in that I was working with people who, like they trusted me. And so the day that I got my bar card said like, do you want to take this deposition next week? Do you want to go to this case management conference? And I, being foolish, said yes. But it's really the best way to learn, I would say, is to like take that leap of faith and gain that experience. And connected to that, if you find that there are people early on in your career that give you those opportunities, A, you need to impress them so that they continue to give you the opportunities, but B, like stick with them because they will allow you to kind of grow your practice and learn from it. I will say, starting off, it is scary because you don't know what you don't know and you will make a lot of mistakes. And so I think you also have to be sort of forgiving of yourself and, learn from your mistakes. And generally in litigation, there are very few mistakes that you can't fix. So know that. And then I think another thing that's helped in my current position where I'm doing more white collar work is the fact that I was previously a litigator. And so now I kind of am known for having not like a niche, but I have this little like hybrid practice where I'm, capable of handling litigation matters, but also doing the white collar work. And that can be very useful for handling white collar matters because like often there is a litigation element to it. And, if it's between me and somebody else working on a case and there is potentially litigation to come up, like I'm probably going to be the person that's going to get the work because I have experience doing that. So, I would just say it's good to have something that kind of makes you unique and stand out. And that doesn't necessarily have to be like that you super specialize in something. It can be that you've dabbled in this practice area, plus you have this other experience. And so you have this like strange hybrid that, it just works. And then related to that, I kind of just like stumbled into white collar work. So I would say, well, it's important to have, a 5, 10-year, 20-year plan, whatever, be flexible. And, you don't know where your career is going to take you. I'm sure that all of the panelists like didn't maybe expect to be where they are. Or they've worked on things that they had no idea that would become their expertise. And so I think that's part of like the fun thing about this job is that you are constantly learning and like being pushed into these interesting directions. So I think it's important to be a little bit flexible.
That's very valuable advice. I hope you all wrote that down because you'll come back to that in the future. I'm going to turn now to Betty with the deputy, who's our Deputy Attorney General. I know there are a lot of sections to the Attorney General's office. And can you sort of describe what they are and what you do there?
Sure. So the Attorney General's office, we're basically the state's central law enforcement authority. And over the past 160 years or so, the duties of the Attorney General have evolved through legislation in response to specific state needs. And the duties and the responsibilities of our office are really statutory. They are in the state government code and we also the California Constitution. And so our office actually it's like a huge law firm. There are three main divisions. There's a civil law division, and that's the section I'm in. There's criminal law, and there's also the public rights division. And within each of the division, there are various sections, 10 to 12 sections within each division. And so if you're not familiar with the Attorney General's office, definitely check out the website. It's oag.ca.gov, I believe. And so within the civil law section, I've been with that section for 14 years now. I am currently in the torts and condemnation section. So anything you learn in the torts section, from constitutional law violation, it could be excessive force cases, to personal injury cases. So we defend everything. I want to say from any type of constitutional violation, Section 1983, to dangerous condition of public property. So everything within that range that's torts related, that's where the torts section would come in, and we defend public entities such as the California Highway Patrol, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, DMV, Cal State campuses, you name it. And so it's quite a broad range, and part of the challenge and the fun is getting to know each client agency and their employees, and the type of work that they do. And so I've defended, medical doctors in prisons, where plaintiffs are the prisoners that allege medical deliberate indifference type cases. I've also met CHP officers who, they drive a lot, so they sometimes get involved in traffic collisions. So it just, every day is different. I enjoy having so many different client agencies, so I learn about the work they do. So for instance, if it's a Cal State case and I get to do site inspections, go to the college campus, interview. So things like that for me is fun as a litigator. I've also worked in the health, education, and welfare section for about 4 years previously. And that section handles clients such as the Department of Healthcare Services, mental health. So anything that has to do with the state welfare, health, and educational programs, that section, in fact, one of the panelists, esteemed panelists, Carmen Snuggs, and I used to work in that section together. And so those cases include prosecution and defense work, and it ranges from issues such as the Medi-Cal program to licensing of nursing facilities and state hospitals. So it's just a wide variety of interesting cases that you could pick up and learn at the AG's office. So that's just the civil section alone. I can't really speak on the criminal law section or the public rights division since I haven't worked in those divisions, but it's like a huge law firm, and every attorney will have some type of specialty.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's certainly taught me a lot. Just a follow-up question. What was it that led you on the path to end up there? Did you have an attorney mentor or a judge mentor that helped you?
Yes, and like what Blythe said, you sometimes just fall into the career path. And so I was very fortunate that while I was at Loyola Law School, I was actually an evening student. And I believe it was during my second year, I showed up at a government career fair, brought my resume, and I saw the California Attorney General's office, walked over and just kind of started talking to the deputy that was there that day, and I handed him my resume. We talked a little bit. Next day I got a phone call. It was very unofficial back then, and he said, "Well, when do you want to start?" I was like, "Anytime." So I basically got my foot in the door that way as a second-year student, became a clerk. started just shadowing the various attorneys that were in the office, and I became close to a mentor. She just like, hey, do you want to go to a mediation with me today? And I said yes. So every time you're offered an opportunity, if time permits, or make time for it. So I started clerking for about 6 months. I maintained contact with this mentor, and 2 years after I graduated, we just became friends. 2 years after I graduated, I found out that she became a supervisor. And so when an opportunity came up, she actually reached out to me and said, Betty, you should apply. And I know that the Attorney General's office, typically they don't hire anybody without litigation experience. And most of my colleagues, by the time they join the AG's office, they already have more than 10, 20 years of experience. So I was definitely a newbie who got lucky. My mentor vouched for me. And so I basically have been there for almost 14 years, thanks to her. It's really important to keep that contact and do a good job while you're a law clerk, and don't be picky about the work assignments, because you do get to meet people and you get to learn a lot of things from different people.
So, and that of course suggests that it's not just luck. I mean, that wasn't just a lucky break for you. You made that happen, you know, by reaching out and making and maintaining those connections, which, you know, can turn out to be very important. We're going to come back to Bobby Grace because he's not here. And we'll move on to our two judges. Judge Klein, you've had a very interesting career path, to say the least, and you've worked in a lot of government offices. And if you could just give us a little synopsis of your path up till now. And again, similar to the question I asked Betty, did you have an attorney or a judge who mentored you or inspired you to become a judge?
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and great to see everybody. I don't think anybody gets to be a judge unless they did have lawyers and other judges who mentored and guided them and gave them advice. And my first mentor, first legal mentor, and I'll go back and talk about my pre-law career, but my first legal mentor was Professor Laurie Levinson, who I'm sure everybody knows here. I was her teaching and research assistant my second and third year in Loyola. And I wasn't the top student in her class, but I was from out of town. I was born and raised in Boston. And I didn't have a job my first summer. So I went up to her and said, I don't have a job. I'd like to stay in Los Angeles rather than go back to Boston. Do you know anybody who needs a law student? She said, I'm looking for a research assistant. And that's what started a 30-year mentorship and friendship. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Laurie and if it weren't for many other people who have helped and guided me along the way. But I'll go back real quick. I never set out to be a judge, never set out to be a lawyer, didn't know any lawyers growing up. I was a music teacher and I got a degree in music education from a state university in Los Angeles. And when I graduated, before most of you were born, there weren't any arts positions in the public schools in Massachusetts. So I used the education part of my degree and I worked for AT&T and other big companies teaching adults how to use their phone systems that were very complex or use their computer systems. This was the early age of computers. Anyway, after about 7 years, I had a really good job. I had stock options and all sorts of stuff, was getting great pay, but I was bored out of my mind. And one day I said to my mom, you know, I can't do this for the rest of my life. There were people who I was working with who had 50 years with AT&T. And I just thought, I can't do this. So she said, well, you always argued with me. Why don't you consider going to law school? And that planted the seed. And so I studied for the LSAT, applied to Loyola, came out, had never been to California, didn't know anybody out here. And the intent was to go back to Boston. I had a little condo and I thought I was coming out for 3 years and I'd go back, but 30 plus years later, I'm still here. So that's just a tidbit of being flexible. And I'm the least likely bankruptcy judge in the world because I started out as a music education teacher. I then came to law school, clerked for two fabulous judges, Judge Lloyd Aspaird on the district court, Judge Arthur Alarcon of the Ninth Circuit. I then went into private practice for just a couple of years. And then I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the U.S. Trustee Program, the U.S. Department of Justice, for close to 14 years. And I was basically a criminal prosecutor. So I started as a music teacher, became a criminal prosecutor, and now I'm a bankruptcy judge. And you might ask, well, you must add bankruptcy in Loyola. I did not. And I wasn't particularly interested in bankruptcy, but please don't tell my colleagues on the bankruptcy bench that's true. I took an opportunity. I wanted to extern during my second year at Loyola, and there was a position open for a bankruptcy externship with Judge Vincent Zerzolo. And I applied and I got the position. And I thought it was interesting, but again, I didn't think this was going to be my life's work. But when I was applying to the U.S. Attorney's Office, after clerking and being in private practice, they didn't have a regular assistant U.S. attorney position, but they had a position for a bankruptcy fraud prosecutor. So they interviewed me because I had externed for a bankruptcy judge. And that basically set my path towards the bankruptcy bench. And when I interviewed for the bankruptcy position, you go through two rounds of interviews. One is with 9 practitioners, either bar presidents or academics or other people who are distinguished in the field. And then the second round of interviews is with a panel of 9th Circuit judges. And after I got the position, I was at a conference somewhere, and one of the judges who was on my committee said to me, you know, I didn't know if you knew anything about bankruptcy, but I figured you could figure it out, and you had litigated, and you seemed smart, and you seemed like you'd do a good job. So, you know, in terms of a straight career path or straight trajectory, absolutely not. I was open to opportunities. I took those opportunities, and I encourage you to do the same, because you never ever know where they will lead you, and maybe they'll lead you to the bench.
True. You will never know. Again, we see a theme here. You know, be open-minded, stay flexible, find good mentors, stay in touch with them, and always listen to your mom. We'll turn now to my friend, Judge Carmen Snuggs. Carmen, I know as an administrative law judge that you cover a vast variety of different kinds of cases. And can you share with us what some of those are, and, you know, maybe what your typical day or typical week looks like?
Sure, thank you, Amy. And before I start, I just want to say that I'm so glad to see all the participants. I recognize George from the last career fair, so thank you for joining us again. So let me just start by saying I had never even heard of an administrative law judge while I was at Loyola, and I learned of them while working at the Attorney General's office, as Betty mentioned, in the health, education, and welfare section, because some of the cases that we handled there, as Betty said, we prosecuted and defended state officials, including the governor, and state officials in state and federal court, but we also prosecuted hearings at the Office of Administrative Hearings, and that's where I learned of those judges. And so I made the switch. I was with the Attorney General's office for 11 years, and I have been an administrative law judge. It'll be 5 years this December. And so we do a wide variety of cases. The bulk of what I do are licensing cases. And so anybody who has a professional license in the state of California or a semi-professional license in the state of California, we hear appeals of decisions made by the state agencies to discipline a license or to deny an application for a license. So anybody from doctors to psychiatrists, chiropractors, to cosmetologists, and small check technicians. That's the bulk of what I do. And the best example I can give is When Michael Jackson passed away, Dr. Conrad Murray was the doctor who administered that propofol to him and was his caretaker. And when Michael Jackson passed away, the medical board wanted to take his and revoke his license. And so, in appealing that decision, my office would be the ones, and the judges there would be the ones to hear that case. And so, just like we hear in the news recently about doctors at UCLA Hospital or USC hospitals that engage in misconduct with patients, teachers who engage in inappropriate relationship with students, or put their hands on students, or just not performing well, and the school district wants to fire them, and the teacher appeals that decision, then I would be the judge who hears the case and issues a written decision on those kinds of cases. So that's the bulk of what I do. Again, it can be some misconduct on the job, or it could be the person gets a DUI or some other criminal conviction. Then the agency will move to revoke or suspend the license, and I will conduct the hearing on those issues. I also do teacher layoff cases, and so teachers in districts get layoff notices in March. It can be based on budget, or they're not teaching certain subjects and they either skip or bump or do whatever to lay off a teacher. And if the teachers want to have a hearing on that decision, then my office conducts those hearings as well. I also do disability retirement hearing cases. So they try to assign us in cases where close to where we live. I live in the city of Long Beach. So for the city of Long Beach, I have done and conducted hearings where a police officer or a firefighter retires and wants disability retirement, and the city has made a determination that they don't qualify for retirement disability benefits, then I would be the person who hears that as well. Also do hearings for the Department of Rehab and the Rehabilitation and the Department of Developmental Services. There's regional centers throughout California who provide services to persons with developmental disabilities. And I hear cases where a person has requested services and the regional center has determined that they're not eligible, or they are eligible for services and they either want an additional service or the regional center has decided it was going to cut a service. Then I conduct those hearings as well. I don't rule from the bench. All my decisions are written proposed decisions. And so depending on the type of case, I either have 10 business days or 30 days to hear cases. And some of the cases that I'm hearing, we're getting a lot of are the opioid crisis. I'm doing a lot of pharmacy board cases where maybe the doctor, when I did involved a doctor that they called the Candy Man, who was prescribing opioids to people, and some of his patients died. And so he was sentenced, I think convicted on 79 federal counts in that criminal case. And then the medical board notified the pharmacy board that there were pharmacists who were filling those prescriptions. And so we conduct the hearings where the pharmacy board goes out, reviews the prescriptions, see if there's any red flags that the pharmacist should have been aware of in terms of patients who are pharmacy shopping, doctor shopping, getting their prescriptions renewed early, and didn't make sure that the prescription had a legitimate medical purpose and filled it. And so I do those kinds of cases as well. So I know I've been hogging the mic for a minute, but I just wanted to give you, we do a lot of different types of cases.
That's mind-boggling.
I'm in the general jurisdiction division of the Office of Administrative Hearings. We also have a special education division, and those judges do hear cases involving students who are raising challenges as to the services they're receiving in different school districts.
Amazing. I'm going to circle back to Blythe. Blythe, you mentioned you do a lot of white collar crime, as well as civil litigation.
Well, I don't do the crime, but
oh, not the crime. I mean, you practice in the area.
yes.
I didn't mean to imply that, certainly. With that clarification, is that work really as sexy as people like to think it is? And are you going to be writing a book soon and retiring?
I mean, as much as like, you know, my clients would probably not be happy to learn that I find their matters interesting, they are extremely interesting. It's kind of funny because my firm, our white collar group is called the Special Matters Group, and the name came about because, you know, they felt a long time ago, they felt that just having the word like criminal in the practice was like too much for these, you know, big business clients or, you know, white collar.
Yeah, that could be
So,
slightly prejudicial. Just
yes,
slightly.
special matters is what I handle. I mean, it is extremely interesting. Like it is a big variety. So, I mean, you know, anytime you're, you know, doing a civil or criminal investigation, like you're opposite prosecutors, you could be opposite DOJ or like the Attorney General's office. So you're dealing with a wide variety of federal and state prosecutors and sometimes like international prosecutors. Like I had one investigation dealing with the like French tax authority. So just like the wide variety of prosecutors that you're dealing with is very interesting. And then, you know, when you have an internal investigation, that's more run by the company that might have an issue. Like, let's say that they discovered that they have a partner in China that, you know, isn't doing things above board. And so they might, you know, realize that they have a problem and come to our firm and say, like, we need you to do a thorough internal investigation and run down all of the facts and talk to all of the people. And, you know, sometimes that would entail writing a report and making recommendations, and other times, you know, it might be so sensitive that you wouldn't want to kind of put anything in writing. But those are very interesting because you know, often get to really know one aspect or all aspects of a company's business, and it might be the most important thing going on at the company at the time. And so, you know, it's very high stakes work. And then of course there's like, you know, run of the mill criminal defense, right? Where it's like your client is dealing with litigation. And so while, you know, these are very sensitive, high stakes matters that are extremely important to the company or individuals, like I think that's what makes it interesting. And then when will I be writing my first novel? I don't know if I really have that like creative writing in me, but something that I kind of regret is like not keeping a journal of my interesting stories as I've gone through my career. So I think maybe that should be like my New Year's resolution, because I'm not so far out of law school to where like I can still remember some of these crazy stories of either like clients or like things that happened to me in big law. But for now, I keep it tightly zipped. So
Oh, there you go. Well, we'll reserve our copies, so we'll be ready to go at your first book signing. I'm going to circle back to Betty now. Betty, you described to us how you ended up at the Attorney General's office. Could you tell us and our participants here what you gained in law school that was valuable to the work that you do now, and what you would recommend to law students to study if they're interested in working at the AG's office?
Sure, that's a great question. You know, it's interesting to hear about Judge Klein's career path. When I started law school, I was actually working in advertising, and that's why I applied to evening program. I was a media planner, media buyer, and so I think my negotiation skills leading into law school kind of put me in that trajectory where I do enjoy the back and forth, and even in law school, I wasn't one of those people that knew what I wanted to do out of law school. I just knew that, okay, I'm gonna go to school, get my grades, and confession to all, torts was my worst grade in law school. And look at me now, still learning about torts. So maybe it's payback. But I do have to say, what I learned in law school is so different than the practical skills. I can't say that I enjoyed torts in an academic setting, learning about, duty, breach, and proximate cause and all that. But when I'm actually practicing law, I'm actually enjoying it a lot more. No, not everybody enjoys discovery, but I am one of those people that like to find out facts, like to discover things, like to interview people. So I feel like in a way, being a people person helps as a litigator, because you do have to deal with difficult opposing counsel. That's just a given. You do have to deal with your client's not so great facts. And so while I was in law school, I not only clerked at the Attorney General's office, I also had the opportunity to clerk at Paramount Studios. So I was just kind of feeling different things out. If there's an opportunity, I would apply. And so I actually worked in the legal affairs at Paramount. And it was interesting to meet the people there. What I noticed was all the attorneys that were in the office, they were all from Yale or Harvard. So part of me felt like, I don't think they will hire me after law school. But the point is, I was lucky enough to at least get a glimpse of what I want to do and didn't want to do. And for me, it was a lot of just editing contracts. So from that experience, I learned that, you know what, perhaps this isn't for me on a day-to-day editing contracts. And so I think that was my experience of entertainment law. I also clerked at the Asian Pacific American Legal Center, which is a nonprofit in downtown LA. And that allowed me to get a glimpse of family law, landlord-tenant, people that cannot afford attorneys, usually seek out nonprofits for help. And because of my bilingual skills, I was able to assist on that intake level. And again, client interview was something I learned from that clerkship. So I think it's really important to not dismiss opportunities to learn, because coming out of that clerkship, I learned that area of law isn't for me. I felt like I was taking the emotional aspect. There were cases that was, the VAWA cases, Violence Against Women Act type cases, domestic violence. I just felt like that was a bit heavy for me. And so it's good to just try out different areas of law, figure out what you don't want to do.
Yes.
And that's a way of putting yourself in the right trajectory, and then finding that area that you could live with and be happy with the challenges that come across your desk. And so I think law school was definitely a training ground to persevere. You're not going to like every class. You're not going to like every clerkship or internship. But that's one way of finding out, and through a process of elimination, you will eventually find that job that inspires you, challenges you, and make you grow on a daily basis. So I think law school experience has been great, being an evening student with a full-time job, but then I later transitioned where I started, I was actually working in a .com industry in advertising. And so when the advertising agency I worked for, when they went out of business, I was lucky I was already in law school, because I was on to my next career path. So you just plan as you go the best you can, but then be ready to just pivot when plans change.
Yeah. Good advice. The word I would take away from that is happy. Find something that makes you happy, that gives you fulfillment and joy. And if it doesn't, take a walk, find something else. I think every one of us has done that at one time or another. And eventually it's worked out for the best. I'm going to circle back to Judge Klein now. The bankruptcy court obviously has a very important mission, to provide bankruptcy relief to individuals and corporations that need it. And I assume, like many of the other courts, it must be overloaded, to a great extent. How do you find a way to balance issuing a fair and impartial decision with the need to move cases along efficiently? Is that a challenge for you and the courts in general?
I think it's always a challenge. You're always questioning, am I, being thorough enough? Am I giving this enough consideration? But stepping back a bit, we thought we were going to be swamped after the pandemic hit. We were sure that there was going to be the tsunami of bankruptcy filings. And for the last 15 months, that's all we've talked about is when is the tidal wave going to hit? But to our astonishment, and to, I think, a lot of economists' astonishment, our bankruptcy filings are way down. And I think one of the reasons, or many of the reasons, are that the government has been pumping so much money into the economy that people haven't had to file bankruptcy, because especially on the consumer level, people wait typically 5 or 6 months after they lose a job or after they have a difficult experience, say a death or a divorce or something else, or an illness, typically to file. And so because there have been so many stimuluses and there's been so much money that the government has provided, people haven't been filing. There's also been the eviction moratoriums, so people are not in jeopardy of losing their homes. And so all of that comes together to say that we aren't anywhere near as busy as we were 10 years ago when I started, which was at the height of the recession, when the real estate market had tanked. And the first day I put on the robe, the first day I became a judge, I got 4,500 cases assigned to me. So it was just like totally overwhelming. And so the only way that I handled it, and what I continue to do today, is I look at what is on for the next week through the next month and try to figure out how am I going to allocate my time, and how are my law clerks and my externs going to allocate their time. So I have 2 law clerks. They're lawyers who have graduated and passed the bar who work with me. One woman who's been with me from the beginning, she's my permanent law clerk, and she had clerked for 2 other judges, and she is phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. I tell her I hope she continues with me to the very end and then continues with me afterwards. She's so good. I also have a term law clerk who's been with me almost 2 years, and he's fabulous too. So they're constantly researching and writing and preparing me. I also have wonderful externs, and a shout out to Graham, who's one of my externs this summer, and they're always doing research and writing. So we're always just looking at what's the next week to month going to be, how are we going to allocate our time, making sure that we're always prepared. And like Judge Snuggs, I do everything in writing. I'll have oral argument on virtually every case, but I do all of my rulings in writing. And typically the rulings are prepared before the hearing. And in most situations, the litigants will have the ruling. And then I'll say to them when I take the bench, please tell me what I got wrong. Please tell me what I misunderstood about your case, so that they can argue and they can see the issues that I didn't think were a big deal or issues that were of concern to me. And so that's how I was able to handle it when I first started, and how I continue to handle it today, which is always being prepared and doing everything in writing, because I process information by writing.
That's very edifying. I'm still getting over the 4,500 cases. That's breathtaking. Judge Snuggs, you described for us very well the vast variety of hearings that you do. What's your favorite part of your job there?
One of the things that I didn't Well, there's a couple of things. One of the things I didn't describe is that in addition to hearings, I also conduct mandatory settlement conferences for long cause matters, and those are matters that are over 4 days. And I also conduct mediation sessions for the Department of Rehabilitation and the Department, and the regional center cases for the Department of Developmental Services. I am a people person. I'm a talker. And when I'm on the bench, I can't talk to people. I can't have that interaction. So my favorite part of the job are my mediation sessions and my settlement conferences, because I can talk to the parties. And one of the most gratifying experiences I've had as an administrative law judge is when I've been able to help parties who come in to a mediation who are, just stuck on their positions, thinking that the case is not going to settle, being able to help the parties facilitate a conversation and see each other's interests so that we can come to a resolution. I say we, and I got to take myself out of it, so they can come to a resolution. And my participation in that aspect is one of the most gratifying things, because if I can help parties obviate the need for a hearing, which is, it's uncertainty for parties, they never know how it's going to turn out, and I can help with judicial economy, then that's great. Second of all, I like being able to just administer justice. I like being able to be on the bench and have people come into my courtroom and see someone who looks like them, can relate. Of course, I afford due process to all parties, but that's a big part of my job as well. I like, some of these hearings, it's like putting a puzzle together. And so I like, just the writing process, even though we have a formulaic writing, because my decisions consist of factual findings and legal conclusions, being able to put the pieces together of a story, because I'm hearing from the complainant, I'm hearing from the respondent, and then how they say there's one side, the other side, and the truth is somewhere there in the middle. Being able to come up with what actually happens, applying the facts to the law, and coming up with, because especially in my disciplinary hearings, is coming up with a solution or discipline that's going to protect the public, because that's my job in terms of these licensing cases. It's about protecting the public from someone who is engaging in misconduct or is alleged to have engaged in misconduct, and issuing a level of discipline. Each agency has guidelines that's fair. Do I want to take somebody's license away to prevent them from, practicing the profession and making their livelihood? In some cases, that's warranted. In some cases, I could put people on probation where they have to comply with probationary terms before to be able to maintain their license. Or can I give somebody who has shown rehabilitation and they apply for the license and the agency denied it, can I grant them a license, whether it's unrestricted or restricted, to give them an opportunity to practice their profession? So just being able to weigh those things and be able to affect somebody's life, whether I'm protecting the public or giving somebody an opportunity, is always a great feeling. So that's the best part of my job. Oh, another part is, as an administrative law judge, I can swear people into the bar, administer the oath. And so I have had law student clerks who have, when I was at the AG's office, I was the law clerk coordinator for my section. And so I've had some law clerks who have passed the bar ask me to swear them in, and it's been an honor to do that. And so that's another fun part of my job as well. And before I relinquish the mic again, I think I had talked about George being at the last career practice fair. And I think, Charles, if I'm not mistaken, you attended last time as well. So I didn't want to be remiss and not acknowledge you. So again, thank you for attending. We appreciate your participation today. So again, I didn't mean to get off topic, but those are the favorite parts of my job, being able to engage in those functions and really be able to affect people's lives in a positive way.
It's good to have parts of your job that are personally gratifying, and often you get to do that when you're engaged in public service. Right, and assisting members of the public. I'm gonna ask the last question. I see Bobby Grace is still not with us, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. He works in the major crimes unit in the district attorney's office, and he's worked on some fascinating cases. So hopefully he'll be able to join us for the breakout sessions and you'll get a chance to meet him. I'm going to just go around to everyone one more time and kind of ask the question of the day, and that is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your practice? Has it made it more difficult? Has it made it easier in some respects? And just what overall effect has it had on you personally and on your practice? Blythe?
It's just, I can't describe an answer to that quickly enough. Like, there's not enough time. But honestly, like, other than the like brief period where we were all facing this lockdown and like figuring out what was going to happen, it's been like pretty seamless for me. And so it wasn't like a huge change for me at all. I tend to work with people all over the country anyway. So like I was always doing calls at home at weird times of the day and all of that. So it hasn't changed that much. Definitely less traveling, which is good and bad. I mean, you miss out on, there are certain opportunities where, it's important to be in the room with your client, or like there were times where the government wanted to do an interview and we were just like, we're not doing it remotely. Like we've never met our client, like we need to be together in person. And so stuff like that. But I think generally I've been very blessed in that being able to work remotely and do like remote hearings, do remote interviews and stuff like that has just made things so much easier and cost effective for clients, and required less traveling while I was pregnant / have a young baby. So for me, it was a win.
Do you think things will ever go back to the before times?
No, but well, I think it will slowly creep back in, but like, I think that there will definitely, I hope that the efficiencies that we've all discovered will continue.
So do we all. Betty, same question as you. How has the pandemic affected your practice?
I think it's been a really nice change. At first, it took a little getting used to, but I do enjoy less traveling, less sitting in traffic, more hours. And I think this pandemic, in a way, has given me a better life-work balance, because instead of spending 3 hours in a car on a regular day commuting to and from LA to Orange County for work, not counting the days and the hours you have to rush to court somewhere out in Riverside or Bakersfield, all of a sudden it's now just expected that you call in, court call, versus before any substantive hearing, you're expected to go in, same with deposition. So I enjoy having this remote aspect of it, and just having this extra time to have a life outside of work as a litigator has been a blessing. So I've been gardening in my backyard. So the garden vegetables are looking good.
I have to ask, do you work at the district courthouse on Spring Street?
We work, so I practice in federal and state court. So yes, the Stanley Mosque is my usual appearance. Appellate court is right in our building in Ronald Reagan. And so far, mediations, depots, court hearings have been remote.
So we had similar commutes then.
Yes.
So, I hear you.
Yeah.
I don't miss that 3 hours a day either. No. Going back and forth. So that's been life-changing. Judge Klein, how about you? How has the pandemic affected your practice and the bankruptcy courts in general?
Well, I think especially in bankruptcy court, it's been easier to administer justice. And the reason is this: by far, the vast majority of our cases are consumer cases, individuals who have gotten into financial difficulty. And if someone in normal times had to come to court, they might have to take a complete day off from work because they'd have to drive downtown and park, which is expensive, and then come in the courtroom and sit and wait until their matter is called and then drive back home. Whereas now they can log on to Zoom and they can be doing other things until their matter is called, and they can still be heard. And they could be heard otherwise, but they don't have to take a day off from work to come to court like they might otherwise have to. Now, I certainly have a number of cases where we have $1,500 an hour lawyers who are litigating heavily. And so, for them, they probably prefer to be in the courtroom because they want to be there. They want to be in the presence of the judge. But I think in terms of the vast majority of our cases, it's been beneficial. And we're what people refer to sometimes as the people's court, and it might be the only time that a litigant steps foot in a court or steps foot in a Zoom courtroom, for lack of a better word. And so, I'm very cognizant of that. I want them to feel that justice has been administered, that it's been fair, and that they've had their opportunity to be heard. And I think it's much easier via Zoom for the individuals, and especially we have about 20% of our litigants are pro se. So about 1 in 5 of the people who step foot in my courtroom are self-represented. And it's scary enough for someone to come into court if they have a lawyer, but imagine someone who's not schooled in the law and is trying to figure out their way around. So I think Zoom creates a bit of informality. And so someone who's pro se might feel less intimidated by being in court during a Zoom hearing. So I think there's been a benefit to that. We're now in discussions about when are we going to reopen and what is it going to look like? And I think it's probably going to be a hybrid model where we'll allow people to appear via Zoom, but we'll also allow people to appear in the courtroom, and it will be up to them.
Okay, Judge Snuggs, you got 1 minute. I assume all of your hearings are being conducted via Zoom or something like that.
Right,
and
we're using
for you.
Microsoft. We're using Microsoft Teams, but I heard we are switching to Zoom. I agree with everything that Judge Klein said.
We went the other way. We went from Zoom to Microsoft Teams, but whatever.
Interesting. It has been great in terms of the travel, the pay to park in downtown Los Angeles for folks. A lot of the parties, respondents in my cases are pro per as well, and self-represented. So it makes it easier, but they've also have had a lot of technological challenges. There's always sometimes a glitch, somebody's video freezes, the audio freezes, the court reporter didn't pick up what was being said, person can't get into the hearing. And so we just have to be patient with the challenges. So at the end of each hearing, I always thank the parties for their patience as well as the court reporter. But again, it makes it easier. We might be going back soon since the emergency orders that allow us to hold the hearings are being lifted. There are some parties who, I've heard some attorneys who will say before we go on the record that they hate virtual hearings. They hate it, and want to go back in person. The biggest challenge for us as administrative law judges is the electronic exhibits in our system not really being equipped to handle so many documents. In one of my cases, there was 500 pages and people having to break them up and upload them and things like that. So those are the challenges that we are facing in terms of virtual hearings and electronic exhibits, moving forward. So we'll see how we can work out those bugs.
Yes, it's been interesting times. I think for everyone, it'll be interesting to see how this continues to shake out. That concludes our main room session. I want to really thank our panelists. I learned a great deal, and I would hope the rest of our participants have as well. We're going to break into the breakout rooms. Again, we will cross our fingers that Bobby Grace will be able to join us, and you'll get a chance to meet him. He's a wonderful person and always has good stories to tell. So I'm going to bail out at this point. I'm going to thank our panelists again, and again, thank our participants. Please look for the announcements of the next sessions, and please encourage your classmates and friends and neighbors to participate as well. And it's been an honor to be with all of you today, and I thank you. And thank you, Maya.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
everyone.
much.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.